Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Monday night, August the 23rd. I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. It's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open if anybody would like to come and sit in there. I'm glad to be able to do these shows, as always. It's a privilege, it's an honor, and to be able to spread the word, awareness, and prevention to stop child abuse, right? Education is what it's all about, and I truly believe that we can do it, and I believe the more we talk about it, the more we're going to find the answers, we're going to find the programs, we're going to find what it's going to take to stop child abuse, right? Whereas if we don't talk about it, and we just keep shoving it under the carpet, nobody wants to talk about it, nobody wants to hear about it, it's going to continue on, right? So we have to face this, we have to face it head on, and we have to face it proactively, because something's got to change. And for these kids out here tonight who are being abused, sadly enough, we know that so many children across North America, Canada, the United States as well, and the worldwide will lose their lives to the hands of their caregivers, their parents, people that are supposed to love them, protect them, and care for them, or another family member, or some sort of a child sexual predator. It's absolutely horrible, and we have to stop it. And for these kids out here, I think it's worth it, and I'll keep talking as long as I have to. My last breath will be taken in the fight to stop child abuse. Right? This has to stop, and these kids do deserve better. And so, thanks everybody for tuning into my shows. I really appreciate it. I have almost 10,000 shows listened to. That's crazy. I never would have imagined that many shows being listened to, and I just appreciate everybody who's tuning in. It's just awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm just continually studying and looking for information, so that's why I thought I'd do these shows. I haven't been able to go back and resume my courses at MRU here in Calgary. I just haven't been able to afford them, and hopefully I'll be able to go back and finish and get my certificates and eventually a degree, and I'm still working on it. So I'm always studying and continually studying and looking for information, and I thought I'd just pass it on to you. So I'm not a professional. You have to listen at your own discretion. The topics of abuse are very sensitive. They're touchy. A lot of people are very uncomfortable around the topics of abuse. And so if you think the show might bother you, you have to turn it off. Listen at your own discretion, please. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, a parent or caregiver, somebody who's older, who can help you to make the decision whether you should be listening or not, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and it's ultimately for children to stop child abuse, right? But there is a lot of adult material on the shows, so I would ask that you would have someone listen to the show with you, just in case you have questions, or they might feel that it's just not age appropriate, and because I'm not sure where the Blog Talk players are now, so just make sure you get permission to listen to my shows. And yes, we're going to get right into talking about what we left off with Friday night, which is the issue of neglect, right? This is another article from Child Welfare Gateway, Child Welfare Information Gateway. That's www.childwelfare.gov/pubs, P-U-B-S, /user manuals, /neglect.pdf. And you can pull this up yourself and take a look at it. 112 pages long, this PDF. We left off Monday night on page 18. We were just basically getting into the whole discussion of what is child neglect, right? The terms and what it actually means and how it's defined, right? And Child Abuse and Neglect's user manual series, this is where this is from. It's called Child Neglect, A Guide for Prevention, Assessment, and Intervention. And it's put out, I'll just read out who's actually putting this PDF out. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families, Children's Bureau, and Office on Child Abuse and Neglect. So that's who's put this article out. And it was published in 2003. And it's 2006 by Diane DePanfilis, DePanfilis, 2006, and 112 pages long. So I don't think we're going to cover the whole thing. I just wanted to touch on the issue of what is neglect. You know what I mean? What are the different types of neglect out there? What are the signs and symptoms for people that we can know so that we can help children? If we know of a child who has these symptoms and who seems to be suffering in a home and is being neglected, or if we even suspect it, we can make the phone call and help that child, right, and help that family This is so important that we get children help. Really, we have to be their ears. We have to be their eyes. We have to be on the lookout for children around us, and that's really where it starts. It starts in the home, first of all. And because 95% of abuse, 90 to 95% of abuse is in the home. So we know it's either parents, caregivers, it's a relative, a close family friend, it's somebody that the child knows who's doing whether it's physical abuse, child sexual abuse, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, neglect, right? It's all happening 90 to 95% in the home by a family member, somebody the child knows. So this is the problem. If we could get everybody to pay attention to the children in their own lives, we could stop, pretty much eliminate child abuse. And then the other 5 to 10% is outside of the home, and that would either be wherever the child is. So daycares, schools, after-school programs, churches, you name it. It's wherever the children are, right? That's where the abuse is taking place. So it's incredibly sad, these stats. We need to get them down. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be abused sexually under the age of 18. This is a fact. It's the truth. It's the way it is. It's the stats across the board. And that's underreported because child abuse is underreported. And so 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys. I mean, no child should be abused ever. And I fight for this. No child should be abused. It's absolutely ridiculous what people are doing to children and what they're doing to their own children. And it's just got to stop. So, we'll just keep working on it, and all of us together, all of the other advocates out there who work day in and day out, to stop child abuse, I feel like we can do it. And together, as a collective, as a group, as a society, as a people in this earth, we can change this, and I truly believe this. So we're just going to keep working at it and pick up where all these other people left off, and hopefully come up with some better ideas, and come up with some better programs, and come up with something that's going to work, right? Because our society is a broken society. All you have to do is take a look around, and I mean, there's good things going on too. So it's not like I'm just all about the negative, but I'm not spending 30 minutes on here to tell everybody how great life is. I'm on here for a specific reason, and that's to point out child abuse and to point out abusers, right? I'm not here to talk about the sunny weather. Catch me at any given time during the day, we can have a chat about that, but I'm specifically determined to get this word out about child abuse and maltreatment and neglect, right? So it's a problem. It's a huge problem. And they said here, we had read this on Monday night, difficulty defining neglect. They said defining neglect historically has been difficult to do, leading to inconsistencies in policies, practice, and research. Because without a consistent definition of neglect, it is nearly impossible to compare research results. And this inconsistency also leads to variability in the way neglect cases are handled, because it's just not across the board one set of what constitutes neglect, right? It's all kind of, even some of it is kind of based on what people believe neglect means. You know what I mean? It's how they perceive neglect, right? There's mild neglect, moderate neglect, and severe neglect. We already went through all that. But I wanted to actually take a look at the different types of neglect. And I think that's important, and that's on page 18 of this PDF. And they talk about abandonment, the desertion of a child without arranging for his reasonable or her reasonable care or supervision. Usually a child is considered abandoned when not picked up within 2 days. So there's abandonment. That's a form of physical neglect. We're talking about physical neglect here. Expulsion, the blatant refusal of custody, such as the permanent or indefinite expulsion of a child from the home without adequately arranging for his or her care by others, or the refusal to accept custody of a returned runaway. That's people that just throw their kids out of their home, just send them off on their merry way. Don't arrange for them to be anywhere, don't arrange for them to have a safe place, just basically kicking them out of their home. And I grew up with kids like that, and it was absolutely horrible to see that. I actually knew a lot of kids who were on the street because their parents threw them out. And the parents were very abusive. I talk about this quite a bit. I knew a lot of children who were abused, a lot of teenagers, a lot of children and teenagers, so all the way through. I just knew a lot of abused kids, right? We all hung out together. Shuttling is another one. When a child is repeatedly left in the custody of others for days or weeks at a time, possibly due to the unwillingness of the parent or the caregiver to maintain custody. So shuttling a child from here to there, right? Some maybe family members shuttling the child off to somebody's house, and then not wanting to pick them up, so they shuttle them off somewhere else. That's terrible. That's a form of physical neglect. Nutritional neglect, when a child is undernourished or is repeatedly hungry for long periods of time, which can sometimes be evidenced by poor growth. Nutritional neglect often is included in the category of other physical neglect. Well, sure it would be. And lots of parents don't feed their children properly, and quite often, it doesn't always have to do with the economy. Some people have money, but they just choose to spend it on drugs or alcohol and gamble it or whatever, and then the child goes with no food. So that's really sad, you know what I mean? And it's happening, believe it or not. It's happening all over the place. Neglect is a lot more prevalent than child abuse. It's actually the largest portion of child abuse. But it's less talked about because there's more urgency, because physical abuse and child sexual abuse is considered to be life-threatening. But neglect is also life-threatening, so it needs to be added in there. I was talking a little bit about that Monday night. Quite often I don't talk about neglect. I don't throw neglect into the sentence of child abuse and neglect. I just usually say child abuse, right? But I should be saying child abuse and neglect, because it's a serious problem in our world. And so many children are neglected every day, abused and neglected. It's a form of abuse, and it's absolutely horrible. Clothing neglect says, this is also another physical form. When a child lacks appropriate clothing, such as not having appropriately warm clothes or shoes in the winter. And, that's just sad. And we know, you see stuff on TV about these children running around with, in poverty-stricken areas around, like, Asia or some other part of the world, right? With all these kids running around with no shoes, no food, no water. Well, it's going on in our own backyard too. Just have to take a little look around. It's not in such a degree, the poverty issue. But there are kids out there who don't have the appropriate clothing because their parents do not make sure that they can get the appropriate clothing to them. Because there's places that will hand out clothing to people who need clothing for their kids. Let's say a parent's struggling and they're just like, man, especially a single parent, because it's hard enough with two, let alone one, and we know so many people are single parents out there. And, the economy, the way that it is, everything costs a fortune, and you're trying to raise a family of one or two, even three kids or something, you're going to need some help. And, nothing comes cheap. And living on a single wage like that, it's got to be difficult. I've known so many single parents out there, and I know how hard it was for them, But there's places out there, that you can go. And you can get a coat for your child. You can get the proper shoes for your child. And they might not have a whole bunch of clothes, but at least if they have a good coat, good pair of nice sturdy winter pants, and a good pair of good warm shoes and socks for their feet, for the winter, but a lot of parents just won't do it. They, for whatever reason, they might have substance abuse problems. They might have some mental issues going on, depression or whatnot, so they can't even function. So their kids run around with no winter coats on, no proper clothing, right? It's just so sad. Other physical neglect includes inadequate hygiene and forms of reckless disregard for the child's safety and welfare. For example, driving while intoxicated with the child, or leaving a young child in a car unattended. And that's also a form of physical neglect. And that's just something people should never, ever do, drive with a child. No one should be driving while intoxicated anyway, but especially with a child in the car. It's not that kid's fault that that person is taking their lives and everybody else's into their own hands. And leaving a young child in a car unattended is absolutely stupid, because anything can happen. And there's too many stories and headlines in the paper of what does happen to kids left unattended in cars. They quite often end up dead. And so you don't want to be doing that, It's just not a good idea. Back in the old days, I think people used to do it all the time, and I don't think the dangers were any less. I think that people, have realized now that it's not a smart thing to do. And it can get you into big trouble because it's against the law. Medical neglect. Here's a section that's quite interesting that people I myself don't know a whole lot about. Medical neglect encompasses a parent or guardian's denial or delay in seeking needed health care for a child as described below. Denial of health care. The failure to provide or to allow needed care is recommended by a competent health care professional for a physical injury, illness, medical condition, or impairment. So that's a form of medical neglect. That's quite interesting. I know my parents were absolutely professionals at that, you know what I mean? The CAPTA, C-A-P-T-A amendments of 1996 and 2003 contain no federal requirement for a parent to provide any medical treatment for a child if that treatment is against the parent's religious beliefs. However, CAPTA also designates that there is no requirement that a state either find or be prohibited from finding abuse or neglect in cases where parents or legal guardians act in accordance with their religious beliefs. So while CAPTA stipulates that all states must give authority to CPS to pursue any legal actions necessary to ensure medical care or treatment to prevent or to remedy serious harm to a child, or number two, to prevent the withholding of medically indicated treatment from a child with a life-threatening condition, except in the cases of withholding treatment from disabled infants. All determinations will be done on a case-by-case basis within the sole discretion of each state. So that's what they had to say about that with the religious beliefs and whatnot. Delay in health care, that's another one. The failure to seek timely and appropriate medical care for a serious health problem that any reasonable person would have recognized as needing professional medical attention. Examples of a delay in health care include not getting appropriate preventative let's see, I'm just going to scroll down here. Medical or dental care for a child, not obtaining care for a sick child, or not following medical recommendations. Not seeking adequate mental health care also falls under this category. And a lack or delay in health care may occur because the family does not have health insurance. Individuals who are uninsured often have compromised health because they receive less preventative care, are diagnosed at more advanced disease stages, and once diagnosed, receive less therapeutic care. So that's very sad, and that's so true. So many people fall within that category, and I know, like, my family always did. And it's a huge job for me, even living in Canada with the healthcare system the way it is. You just pretty much get help just walking down the street, stop in the hospital and get some help. But I still don't do it because it was ingrained in me in my lifetime when I was a child that we don't go get help, right? For no reason. Unless you get hauled in an ambulance or something, then you just deal with it, right? And so it's hard. It's a hard thing to break. You know what I mean? To get yourself to take care of yourself when you're not looked after as a child, and you're not. Your parents did not show by example or show a good example of taking care of themselves, or the family members. You tend to take that on, and that's something I did take on from my parents that I wish I wouldn't have taken on. I'm trying to learn to correct it now, but as an adult survivor of child abuse, right? But it's very hard, and because it's part of my makeup. It's who I am. I've been in car accidents, walked away from them without going to the hospital, and they weren't my accidents, thank God. I was with other people, but the thing is I didn't even want to go get checked out, after the accident, and these people were taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and I just wandered off, like, oh well, I'll just go home and sleep it off, and that's just because I was abused as a child, and so I've just learned to take whatever comes my way and deal with it. So it is hard. It's hard to stop to actually change that type of behavior. I'm working on it. It's something I am working on. It's a work in progress for sure. But I'm working on trying to stay healthy and keep myself healthy, right? So important. But that's just a good example for people of what can happen if young people grow up in a situation like that. I know for as far as seeking health care and whatnot, like my parents were very much like that. My sister sliced her eye one time on a barbed wire fence in the backyard. She was coming over it and sliced her eye, and it was bleeding and whatnot. She showed my mom, and my mom was like, "Oh well, it'll be all right," because my mom, my parents were not going to get us any help, they didn't want any attention being drawn anyway to the family because they'd already been brought up on charges, see, so they didn't want the hospitals looking in on anything, right? So they were like, no, we're not going to take her in, it'll heal, right? So my sister's eye was slashed, and a neighbor actually saw it and said, you have to take your daughter. You cannot let your daughter's eye heal like that. You're going to have to take her into the hospital. And my parents were like, no, we're not going to take her. And that lady said, no, if you don't take her, I'll take her. And so she forced my parents to take my sister. They were not going to take her. And that's just how my parents were. I know one time I fell on a root in the backyard because my nephew pulled out a chair out from under me, and I fell on a root sticking up out of the ground. It was huge. And I couldn't walk for 3 days. It was about 3 days that I was laying on the couch, and I'm telling you, I was in such pain and agony, and my parents did not take me into the doctor, and I've had back problems since then. And, that's just what happens with people when they don't look after their children, right? But this is just a good example of neglect, of, physical neglect and health issues, denial of health issues and whatnot, right? So it's really sad, and we know it happens more than people know, right? And so that's why I'm just throwing what I know into the mix there, just to give an example, right? I'll scroll down here. They talk about inadequate supervision. That's another one. Inadequate supervision encompasses a number of behaviors, including lack of appropriate supervision. Some states specify the amount of time children at different ages can be left unsupervised, and the guidelines for these ages and times vary. In addition, all children are different, so the amount of supervision needed may vary by the child's age, development, or situation. It is important to evaluate the maturity of the child, the accessibility of other adults, the duration and frequency of unsupervised time, and the neighborhood or environment when determining if it is acceptable to leave a child unsupervised. That's so important for people to know. I think people, especially when kids get older, they start hitting that 11, 12-year-old mark, and they think, oh, I'm all grown up and I can stay by myself. And, you do have to, it depends on how mature that child is. You really have to know their behavior and what they're capable of doing. What they're capable of doing as far as getting help if something goes wrong, how to keep themselves safe when they're on their own by themselves, like especially at home, if they're going to be home for part of the day, latchkey kids and whatnot. It's so important to know that some children are just not mature enough to handle it, and they really have to be aware of what's going on and very much aware of what can happen while you're not there, and what to do in case these types of things come up, right? So that they're aware, so that they're not thinking at the last minute if something happens, like, oh my God, what do I do? Someone tries to break into the house while you're not there, and they're there by themselves. What do they do? If you don't have a plan and you don't have some sort of a safety plan for your children and yourself, right? Then it's not a good idea to be leaving your children by themselves, because if they're not prepared to handle emergency situations and not prepared to be responsible, then don't leave them by themselves, because they can get hurt, right? And they can be killed, they can be kidnapped, anything, right? It's very scary. So and fear is not the way to live. It's really all about education, right? Exposure to hazards is another one. Examples of exposure to in and out of home hazards include safety hazards like poisons, small objects, electrical wires, stairs, drug paraphernalia, smoking, secondhand smoke, especially for children with asthma or other lung problems, guns and other weapons, guns that are kept in the house that are loaded and not locked up or are in reach of children, unsanitary household conditions, which is like rotting wood, human or animal feces, insect infestation, or lack of running or clean water, lack of car safety restraints. That's a big one. I know they'll fine people big time if they don't have the proper child seats, like child safety seats in the cars and whatnot. Inappropriate caregivers is another one. Another behavior that can fall under failure to protect is leaving a child in the care of someone who either is unable or should not be trusted to provide care for a child. Examples of inappropriate caregivers include a young child, a known child abuser, or someone with a substance abuse problem. So yeah, like if a parent knows that someone is not going to be a good caretaker, a good babysitter, or a good person to look after their children, and they let their children stay with them anyway, then they're just setting that child up to be hurt, in one way or another, by accident or on purpose, you know what I mean? And so it's so important that people know. You got to know where your children are and who is around your children at all times. People think this is a joke, but see, that's why kids are getting molested and raped at daycare centers, at churches, church functions, things like that, where you would just never suspect that could happen in your church. Oh, it doesn't happen in my church. It doesn't happen in my city. It doesn't happen in my town. Well, it does. It happens all the time. 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will experience some form of child sexual abuse under the age of 18, whether that is unwanted sexual touching or rape or molestation, you name it, assault, they will, 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys. That's a fact, and it's underreported. So it's probably more like 1 in 2 girls and 1 in 4 boys. It's absolutely horrible. You do not want your child to be a victim. So, what you want to do is find out who these people are that are around your children. And there's no shame in asking. There is shame in not asking, and then finding out that your child's been sexually abused or physically abused or killed or kidnapped or something like that. That's the shame. That's the real shame, right, is not protecting your children. So you have to know that there's lots and lots of teachers out there who are sexual predators, child sexual predators. They get into the teaching industry because they want to have access to children. And that does not mean that all teachers are child sexual predators. It just means that there are some out there. So I would want to know who my teacher was. And I tell you what, I'd be watching them like a hawk. I'd be checking online, Googling their name, Googling anything I could find out about them. I would be checking the child sex offender registry lists. I would be, or just the sexual offender lists, right? I'd be checking everything. Because I'm telling you what, if I had a kid, which I don't, because it's very sad that I lost my baby halfway through, right? So I don't have any children. But if I did, let me tell you what, I would know where my child was and who was around my child at all times. And I wouldn't be making a big deal of it to scare my kid. I would just educate my child and my family. We'd become educated and we'd be a whole lot better off for it. And, then keep a real close eye on who is around your child. Very, very important. Because that's where child sexual predators like to hang out, is with children. They'll befriend them. They're a lot of times coaches, mentors, counselors, you name it. Doctors, lots and lots of doctors, and just different people like that have access to children, right? So important to realize that, child sexual predators are not these scary-looking, cartoon figures out of the newspaper, wearing a black hat and a cape, walking around in the dark alley, looking all sinister and evil, right? Child sexual predators drive fancy cars. They hold down really good jobs. They have the latest haircuts. They look great. And they quite often have money, and they want to share it around, and they want to have fun, and they want to get to know your family, and especially if you have children. And then they want to start doing stuff with your family, and they want to get in real tight with you, real close. A lot of times they'll try to do that so they can weasel their way into your life and into your home, right? And otherwise, they're just people that live on the street that you have no idea that they've been convicted, or that they haven't even been convicted, but they live on your street, and they've been molesting kids for years and getting away with it. And they look like average, normal people. You might be like, wow, I used to see that guy all the time. I didn't know he was a child sexual predator. Oh my God, my kid was always going over there. Oh my God. You really have to be very, very careful because they blend in. They look like everybody else, and they don't look like these scary people that people like to think a child sexual predator might look like. They're teachers, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're police officers, they are they're parents, they're your neighbors, they're coaches, mentors, anybody who likes to work with kids, daycare operators, you name it. Clowns, face painting clowns. You got to really, if I had a clown come into my house, I'd have a background check done on them. You bet. Whether it's a female or a male, there's a lot of female sexual predators out there as well. So it's just so important to know what's happening and get the education, and learn about what's happening out there so that you can protect your family and protect your children. It's so important. And, know the signs and symptoms of all the different types of abuse. It's so easy to find that out. You can get that from it's a free PDF download from Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, www.dreamcatchersforAbusedChildren.com. And it's a free PDF download. It's called the Child Abuse Handbook, and Donna Shear and Sandra Potter compiled it from all the information out there on the web, all the good resources and stuff out there. And it's just sort of an all-in-one resource full of good information on all the signs and symptoms of child abuse, how to report it, resources for parents and whatnot if you're having trouble. You think, oh my God, I'm hurting my child, but I don't want to. How can I get help? There's just so much good information there. It's get a hold of us or just go to the website www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com, and you can get that free PDF download, or from lulu.com, Sharon Potter Books. And thanks everybody for being here. I'll be back on tomorrow morning with one child abuse survivor to another, and then again tomorrow night, Janelle Matula will be on Dreamcatcher Talk Radio. at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's www.blogtalkradio.com/dreamcatchers. Janelle Matula is the South Central Regional Director. She's taking the show tomorrow night for the first time, and by herself, and she's giving me a break, a night off, so which is just awesome. But I still might be in the chat room for part of it. So have a great night, everybody. Take care, and we'll be talking to you real soon. Bye-bye.